The New York Rangers may not trade Jacob Trouba because his wife needs to finish her residency. Did I really just say that?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1104 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So we are in the middle of the Jacob Trouba saga here. We thought there was a trade in place, and then we weren't sure if Trouba was going to try to block the trade, and about a million things have happened here. I'm going to do my best to sum it all up in one episode here. I think first and foremost, what we've got to do is ask a couple of questions here that, to my knowledge, have not yet been answered. We're kind of at the stage of this entire story where there are more questions than answers. So we're going to break that down first. We're also going to talk about what the Rangers could next try to do with Jacob Trouba. They've got some options, some pretty wide-ranging options at that. And also, I'm going to have my final thoughts on this entire situation with the Troubas, with Chris Drury, with the Ranger franchise, with, even the fans of this team, pretty much everything. And I'm going to share my opinion. I mean, I'll be sharing my opinion a little bit throughout the whole thing, but I'm going to have some final thoughts at the very end of this episode. But let's go ahead, again, to just kind of summarize everything that's happened as quickly and as best as I possibly can here. Basically, it was reported that there was a deal in place, for the Rangers to trade Jacob Trouba to the Detroit Red Wings. It would involve the Rangers retaining $2.5 million of Trouba's salary, but the Red Wings would take up, the rest of the salary, the rest of the $5.5 million. And as far as who else might be involved in the trade, to my knowledge, we don't know. There were some guesses out there, but we don't know. There's a question I got to throw out there. And this one, I think I kind of know the answer to, but you guys can weigh in on this if you'd like. Like I said, we got to get through a couple of questions here that I think need to be answered before we can really, truly have a firm grasp on what's going on here. First of all, this report from Larry Brooks that said that the Rangers were going to be trading Jacob Trouba to Detroit, and also said in pretty much no uncertain terms that one way or another, Jacob Trouba is done with the Rangers. The exact quote, I believe, was the decision has been made. So the Rangers, per this report at least, were ready to either send Trouba to Detroit, or failing that, I would assume probably waive him. One way or another, it looked like, per this report, that the Rangers were going to be moving on for Jacob Trouba. Now there's reports that Trouba never actually blocked a trade to Detroit and that there was no trade officially on the table. So is that the case? Was there truly never any trade that was there? And if that was the case, then why would Brooks report it as being a trade that was on the table if it was not on the table? So there's that. There's also the question, maybe there was a trade offer on the table, but this is a way now for Chris Drury to kind of save face now that it looks like Jacob Trouba is going to be sticking around, and he can say, well, no, that there was no trade. We never agreed on anything. I don't know the answer to this question. We might never know the answer to this question, but my best guess here, as far as why the Rangers went public, and obviously somebody, gave some kind of a story to Larry Brooks here. I don't think Brooks is just going to make things up. They maybe did that because the Rangers believed that Jacob Trouba would go along with a trade to the Detroit Red Wings. He's obviously got some history there, and it is an up-and-coming team, and obviously he can stay in the United States. My other guess is that the Rangers initially, maybe not so much now, but initially they were prepared to waive Jacob Trouba if Trouba did not comply with the trade. They probably felt like they could get Trouba to agree to a trade with the Detroit Red Wings. He can go to Detroit, rather than the alternative, which would have been, Trouba blocks a trade to Detroit, and then the Rangers put him on waivers. If they put him on waivers, then obviously any of the other 31 teams can claim him, and Trouba's got no control whatsoever over where he goes. So that's my best guess. Can't say for sure. Another question I have here, if you're the Rangers, why would you let Trouba know that a deal is in place with the Detroit Red Wings? Wouldn't it have made more sense if you're Chris Drury and the members of this front office to wait for Trouba to submit his 15-team list and then see whether or not Detroit is on the list. If Detroit is not on the list, then you can trade him to Detroit and Trouba doesn't get any say in it. And that is a little bit cold, I admit that, but we know how this business works. Players get traded all the time. Guys get dealt from one team and sent to another team that they don't really want to go to. It's just the way that it goes in professional sports. So that could have been something the Rangers did. Wait for him to submit his no trade list, the 15 teams, see if Detroit is there. If they're not there, then you can pull the trigger on a trade. If they are there, then you can try to talk Trouba into, waiving his no trade clause and saying that, listen, you can go there or you can take your chances with waivers. They did not do that. They leaked it. And I don't know if Trouba put Detroit on his no trade list, but after, that news broke, I think there's a very good chance that he did. Again, can't say for sure because his 15-team list is not public. The other question I have here, and I kind of already went over this one, but were the Rangers truly ready to move on from Jacob Trouba by any means necessary? That initial report from Larry Brooks would suggest that they were. They were going to try to trade him to Detroit. Failing that, it sounded like they were, willing to put him on waivers. That sentence, the one that really stuck with me and really suggests that that indeed was the case, was the fact that Brooks said in his article, the decision has been made. Well, seemingly not, because Jacob Trouba is still here. And honestly, if you ask me right now, is he going to be on the roster on opening night? I would probably say yes at this point, based on everything that's happened. And even more what has not happened, because he never got traded. And if the Rangers wanted to free up that cap space, the time to spend it on the big UFAs has come and gone, because most of the big UFAs have already signed with one team or another. And then there's this portion that I have a question about of the Brooks article that's so vague that I don't even really know what to make of it. But this is straight from Larry Brooks' most recent article, the one where he basically contradicts the article before that. This is what it says. There is no guarantee that Jacob Trouba would accept a trade even to a club on his approved list if that means leaving his wife and 9-month-old as of training camp behind. It is not as if Dr. Tyson Trouba can pick up, transfer her credits to another hospital, accompany her husband, and still be a licensed physician. So, first of all, I don't know how the whole medical system works, so I'm just going to have to take Larry Brooks', word on that. And the question that kind of comes up after I read that for me, does this mean, if I'm reading this correctly, that Jacob Trouba was fully prepared to refuse to comply with a trade, even if it was to one of the 16 teams that is not on his no trade list? Reading this article, and again, it's very vague. It doesn't explain it very well. It might be intentionally vague, to be fair here. But the way I'm reading this is that Trouba, even if he was traded to a team that was not on his no trade list, he was going to just refuse to go along with it. Now, I'm no lawyer, but I can tell you he's not allowed to do that. And to me, that would seemingly be a violation of his contract. So it begs another question. Is this something that was floated out by Trouba and his camp, that I'm going to refuse to comply with any trade, even if it's a team that is not on my no trade list? Did he purposely float that news out there? Or did his team in some way leak that one way or another to deter other teams for trading for him? Because think about it. If you're a team and you want to trade for Jacob Trouba and you're finding out that this guy's not going to comply and he's not going to report for your team, then you're probably not very likely to go through with the trade, right? So that might be a way that Trouba and his camp went about trying to make sure that a trade doesn't happen. I don't know. The other question here, if a trade did happen and he did go to a team that's not on his no trade list, he got dealt to a team that's not on his no trade list, would he follow through with this? Would he actually sit out an entire season of hockey? He's technically allowed to do that. I mean, he obviously wouldn't get paid. I mean, it's just like any other job, right? Nobody can force me to go to work. Nobody can force you to go to work. But if you refuse to go to work and you don't have a good reason why, you're going to be unemployed pretty soon, and your income is going to go down to $0.00. And it's the same deal here with Jacob Trouba. Nobody can make him play hockey, but if he refuses to report to one of those teams that is not on his no trade list, again, I got to believe that's a violation of his contract, and it's grounds for contract termination. And that's probably what would happen. Now, of course, he could return to the NHL anytime that he wanted to. He could sit out, maybe the upcoming season and then come back the year after that. But he's going to be giving away $8 million this year, $8 million next year. And if he were to do that, whatever contract he signed after sitting out a year, Jacob Trouba is not going to get $8 million a season. Okay, that's just not going to happen for a myriad of reasons. We don't really need to get into those right now. But that's basically the long and short of it. The other thing, too, I have not seen this confirmed by anybody, but there's a lot of people kind of wondering aloud, is there specific language in Jacob Trouba's contract where his full no move clause runs parallel with Dr. Tyson Trouba's residency? I have never heard of a professional sports contract like that. Doesn't mean it's impossible. Maybe that is in his contract. I don't know that for sure. But something that happened was that her residency, for one reason or another, was delayed a year. I'm not sure if it had anything to do with COVID and maybe, you just couldn't do certain things when COVID was going on. And maybe that's why it was delayed a year. But I mean, can that be put into a professional sports contract that, like, a pro athlete, his no move clause will run parallel with his wife's residency? I guess it's not impossible. I mean, we've seen some strange things put into contracts when it comes to professional sports over the years. I've never heard of anything like that. I feel like it would be completely unprecedented, but I guess it's at least possible. By that same token, though, I have not seen that confirmed by anybody. That information may not be public either, but I guess it's at least possible that that verbiage is in his contract. And we'll wait to see if we get any official word about that, because that would change things. Look, if that's in his contract and it's known that as long as her residency is going, his full no move clause stays intact, then yeah, he would have every right to block any kind of a trade that he wants to. Again, I don't know, though, if that's actually what's in his contract. But we got a lot more to talk about here. We're going to dive into a couple of different options that the Rangers now have with Jacob Trouba going forward here. We will get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. Save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out to the everydayers. Can't thank you guys enough for tuning in. There's a million places you can get your Ranger news. Means a lot that you spend some time with me, potentially every day, for the everydayers. I'm going to keep things rolling. I mean, this Trouba story is not even close to being done. We're going to keep our eye on that. Rangers also made a couple of very small UFA pickups a little bit earlier today, or at least that's when it was reported. We've got development camps starting today. All the young Ranger players, including this year's rookie class, are all there. So we'll get to that. We'll talk about any free agents that might be remaining, a whole bunch of stuff coming on Locked On New York Rangers. But for today, this is indeed the Jacob Trouba show. And that leads me into what options do the Rangers have with Jacob Trouba moving forward? There's a lot of different ways this can play out. Option one, they can still trade him, and they are completely within their right to do so. And I am sympathetic to the Trouba family and their situation. They've obviously got a newborn at home. I believe their son Axel is now 5 months old, because I think, if I remember correctly, he was born in January, and it was really cool. Trouba had him out on the ice during the Winter Classic, before the game, and he had him like on ice skates and was just kind of holding him and pushing him around the ice. So that was pretty cool. But again, while I do sympathize with the family, Jacob Trouba and his family would not be the first family that's had to, kind of uproot everything due to a professional sports trade, and they won't be the last one either. So we got to be fair and be fair to both sides of this, entire debate that's going on right now. But again, the Rangers can still trade him in theory, because Trouba submitted his 15-team list just before the midnight deadline on Monday. And when I say that, I mean like Sunday going into Monday. And obviously free agency then started 12 hours later on Monday afternoon at noon Eastern Standard Time. So, the Rangers, they asked for Trouba's list prematurely. Trouba, though, again, completely within his right. His deadline for submitting his 15-team list was, once again, midnight on Monday. It sounds like he basically waited until the 0 hour, presumably because he doesn't want to be traded, and that's when he submitted his list. And again, he is completely within his right to do that. Again, we do not have the list of Trouba's 15 teams, but obviously the Rangers do. That's what's important. And if the Rangers try to trade him to a team that's on his list, whether it's Detroit or anybody else, again, Trouba has every right to block that trade. It's in his contract. If he wants to block a trade, he can block a trade completely within his right. However, if the Rangers are able to strike a deal with one of these 16 teams that are not on Trouba's no trade list, then they are completely within their right to do just that. Again, it's a cold business. It's rough, seeing players bought out of contracts and waived and traded across the country and, maybe traded from a good team like the Rangers to a bad team, a million miles away. It's unfortunate, but that's just the reality of this situation. That's how professional sports work. So if the Rangers still want to trade him, they still can. There is something that could have prevented this entire situation, by the way, and I'm going to discuss that in greater detail later in the episode. But for now, let's continue looking at the Rangers' options with Jacob Trouba. Option 2, they can still waive Jacob Trouba. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. If they place Jacob Trouba on waivers, then all 31 teams in the NHL will have a chance to claim him. Any team that does claim him, similar to the Barclay Goodrow situation, they would then take on the player and take on everything left on his contract. So any team that claimed Jacob Trouba off waivers, they inherit the 2-year contract, the 2 years left on his contract, and the $8 million per season that comes along with it. I don't think anybody would claim Jacob Trouba, especially with, all this drama that's kind of kickstarted over the last couple of days. But, there are a lot of teams out there that have a lot of cap space and they have money to spend. In some cases, these teams have to get to the salary cap floor. There could be some teams looking for some physicality, some toughness, some snarl, some veteran leadership, the things that Jacob Trouba does bring to the rink every single night. And just a veteran player in general. Maybe one of those teams would claim him. It's at least possible. All it takes is one of the other 31 teams to put in a claim. And just like that, Jacob Trouba is an ex-Ranger and he goes to whatever team claims him on waivers. So that's also still on the table for the Rangers. Option 3, and I feel like this is the one that's probably the most likely to happen at this point. You just bring Jacob Trouba back next season and act like nothing happened. And I don't know how easy that's going to be. I mean, you can't really put the genie back in the bottle at a certain point. All these things have come out and the Rangers, seemingly doing everything they can to basically just dump Jacob Trouba and dump his contract. And now, I mean, you're going to do a reverse course and bring him back and he's still going to be your captain. And you're just going to move forward into next season and just act like everything is all peachy between, Jacob Trouba and the members of the front office. I mean, look, Jacob Trouba and Chris Drury, they don't have to be best friends. And also in the Brooks report, it said that both sides have been respectful to one another throughout this process. At least that's the belief. But you got to believe there's going to be some ill feelings there. More so, I would say, from Trouba to Drury rather than Drury to Trouba. Because, I mean, Trouba's the one that's, almost getting traded and waived and whatever else here. So yeah, they would maybe want to try to mend fences. But again, they don't have to really interact that much. The players and the GM don't really even need to see each other all that often. So I guess you could work your way around that. And then option 4, this is more like 3A, I would say, or 3B, whatever you want to say. You bring him back next season, but you strip him of the captaincy. I don't like this one at all because if you do this, if you bring Trouba back after everything that's happened, and then you also take away the captaincy, you're basically just pouring gasoline on an inferno. I mean, it's already a bleep storm right now. You take away the C and you put it on somebody else, and half the locker room wanted Trouba to stay captain, half the locker room wants, like, I don't know, Trocheck or somebody like that. I mean, now you're dividing a locker room potentially. You're just creating more chaos in an already very chaotic situation. So I do think Jacob Trouba, the most likely thing that happens, he's back with the team next year and he remains the captain. And I don't know if that's the best course to go down. I think the Rangers really could have used that cap space. I think it was time to move on from Jacob Trouba this offseason. Again, I do sympathize with him and his family. It's not fun being uprooted like that, especially when you've got a lot going on in New York. They seem very happy here. They seem like they genuinely want to be here. And obviously for Dr. Tyson Trouba, she's got, her residency going on. And obviously, that means a lot to her. Dedicated professional, anybody that works in the medical field, nothing but respect from me to those individuals, very selfless people. My wife's a nurse, my mom's a nurse. So I get it, and obviously, Dr. Tyson Trouba has goals and aspirations in her career, and that's awesome. And it will kind of throw a monkey wrench into things if they are traded. But again, I just keep coming back to the idea that this is not the first time that we've seen this happen where a player gets traded and the family has to move. And it's an unfortunate side of professional sports, but it does come with the territory of being a professional athlete in the NHL, the NFL, MLB, any professional sports league that there is. So yeah, that's kind of where things stand there. That's kind of my thoughts on that whole thing. There's obviously some different options the Rangers could go with Jacob Trouba as this thing plays out. We're going to continue following it. I'm going to conclude today's episode by talking a little bit about my opinion on this entire thing. I mean, I've already been doing that a little bit, but we're going to dive into it a little bit more coming up here in just a second. All right, let's go ahead and conclude today with some of my thoughts on this entire situation. Again, something I keep coming back to in this episode, and I'll repeat it here. I do sympathize with the Troubas as much as I possibly can. They are new parents. Again, a young child, a baby, an infant, I believe, again, now 5 months old. Clearly, they're very happy in New York. They're both very charitable off the ice. So that's obviously awesome to see. They seem like genuinely good people. And, you know, it's unfortunate whenever there's a situation like this, a tough business decision when it comes to professional sports. It also sounds like, going by all these reports and everything that's out there, that Jacob Trouba and his team, his agent or whatever, when they negotiated this contract, they did it specifically with the idea that his full no move clause would run parallel with the residency of Dr. Tyson Trouba. And I get that, and that very well could be what the idea was. And again, her residency was pushed back a year, but I don't see how, if that's not in his contract, I don't see how you can see, if you're the Rangers, how you can allow the situation of the family to dictate your next move here, because the Rangers are trying to win the Stanley Cup. And again, this is a very cold business. I get that. And I get people that are sympathetic to the Troubas in this situation. And I am too, to an extent. But as I mentioned, this is something that comes with the territory when you're a professional athlete. And you have Trouba defenders who are taking things way too far, and they're going online. They're saying things like, oh, you're all just mad because Trouba's standing by his wife, and you're mad because he actually cares about his family. Stop. It's nothing like that. For me, this comes down to one very simple thing. It is all about the contract that was agreed upon. These are the terms of the contract. Jacob Trouba's full no move clause, supposedly, assuming that clause is not in his contract, that it's going to run parallel with his wife's residency, that would mean that his full no move clause ended on July 1st. Those were the terms that were agreed to. It's no different than any other professional contract that was signed in the past when it comes to pro sports, or that will be signed in the future. And if I want to be fair here, I also want to call out people on the other side of the spectrum, because there are some people posting some really nasty things on social media about Jacob Trouba and his family. You've got people saying things like, oh, I hope she remembers to never show her face in Madison Square Garden again. That's like a borderline threat, and that's absolutely disgusting. There's no place for it at all in this world. I feel like Jacob Trouba's family is completely off limits in this entire thing. I mean, especially his son. His son is 5 months old. His wife should be off limits as well. They're real people. They have, their lives going on. I know Jacob Trouba is a hockey player and he's in the limelight and everything, but they're real people. He's not just some hockey playing robot. And I understand them not wanting to leave New York. The thing that it comes back to for me, though, is that these were the terms that were agreed upon when Jacob Trouba signed his contract. And when the Rangers traded for Jacob Trouba, let's go back in time to when that happened. It happened in June of 2019. At the time, and of course, the trade was struck with the Winnipeg Jets, Trouba had 1 year left on his deal. He took the Rangers for every dime that he could, and he's not lived up to that contract. And you know what? I don't have a problem with him getting as much money as possible, because that's what most pro athletes want to do. And we've talked about how this is a business. If it's a business, it has to be a business on both ends of it, the team ownership and the players. But he did very well for himself, a 7-year deal worth $56 million. So $8 million per season. And I want to bring something up that I talked about a little bit earlier in the episode. Remember, I mentioned that there is something that could have been done that would have prevented this entire situation. I'm going to explain that now. So every contract negotiation, whether it's Jacob Trouba or anybody else on the Rangers or anybody else in the NHL or anybody else in professional sports, it goes back and forth. And there's obviously going to be, some the the team goes low, the player goes high, and eventually you meet in the middle. I mean, that's basically the long and short of it. But there's also going to be concessions made on both sides. If you want a longer contract, it might be a little bit less money per season. If you want, say, a full no move clause, then it also might result in you having to take a little bit less money per season. And with that said, if a full no move clause for Jacob Trouba's entire contract was that important to him, and he wanted to make sure there was no way that he could be traded by the Rangers to any team in the NHL, at least not without his consent, because players can waive their no move clauses. But if he wanted to have that kind of power and that kind of just singularly control his future with the Rangers, if he wanted all that, then what he could have done is taken a little bit less money per season and gotten the full no move clause put into his contract. He didn't do that. Like I said, he took the Rangers for every dime that he could, and he's got every right to do that. If he can get himself an awesome contract, then more power to him. But again, the fact that Jacob Trouba is making $8 million a year, he probably could have had a full no move clause for the entire contract if he had taken a little bit less money per season. Now, how much less money would it have required for him to get that? I don't know that for sure. If he took like $7.5 million a season, would that have gotten it done? Would $7 million per season have gotten it done? $6.5 million per season? I mean, at a certain point, if you take a little bit less money, the Rangers are going to give in to your request of having the full no move clause. You would have to think. There's always the possibility that maybe the Rangers, under no circumstances, were going to allow a full no move clause for the entire contract. But I got to believe, again, if Trouba's, money demands go down a little bit, that he could have eventually figured out a way to get that worked into his contract. He didn't do that. He wanted every dime he could possibly get. And again, more power to him. It's up to him and his team what they want to negotiate. But clearly, $8 million a year was at least slightly more important, or it looks that way. It was more important than a full no move clause for the entire contract. So had he gotten the full no move and taken a little bit less money, then we probably wouldn't be in the situation that we're in right now, because why even try to trade Jacob Trouba if you know he doesn't want to be traded, and if you know that he can't be traded if he has the full no move clause. Another question that I got to throw out there is, because there are a lot of people that are sympathizing with the Troubas, and I get it. I wouldn't want to uproot my family and move to Detroit right now either. We're happy where we're at, and things are going well. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to do that. But that's the way it goes in professional sports. These guys are making bare minimum 6 figures a year, most of them 7 figures a year, and Jacob Trouba is not too far away from 8 figures a year. So my question for everybody, standing up to Jacob Trouba and going to bat for them and everything, why do they get such special treatment? Look at other players in the Rangers, past, present, and probably even future. Barclay Goodrow was just put on waivers and claimed by a team that had the worst record in the NHL last season, a team that just so happens to play on the complete opposite side of the country. He didn't want that to happen. He didn't really have a choice in the matter, though, because of the contract that he signed. My understanding is that Barclay Goodrow also has a very young child. Where's his special treatment? He had to be put on waivers, and now he has to report to the Sharks. And by all accounts, he's not very happy about it at all, but he's a professional, and he's going to go over there and do what he has to do. You look at Alex Wennberg. Alex Wennberg was acquired by the Rangers at the trade deadline this season. He's got to move from Seattle to New York. Again, a cross-country move in the middle of the season, and he's doing this having already had one kid, and his wife being, I think she was like 8.5 months pregnant with their second kid. It's not easy, but it's part of the business. And he did what he had to do, and, by all accounts, was happy to be a Ranger. He's moved on, as we all thought that he would. Who did he sign with? I think the Sharks, but that's another example right there. How about somebody like Johnny Brodzinski? Johnny Brodzinski has basically, there was an article by Vince Mercogliano about this, a couple months ago when Brodzinski signed his 2-year extension with the Rangers. Brodzinski's basically been moving all over the place. I mean, he's played for all these different AHL teams, a couple of different NHL teams. He's been waived. He's been traded. He's been this. He's been that. Constantly having to uproot his family. And he's got 2 kids and a dog. Don't underestimate the dog. You got to figure out a way to get the dog, moving from town to town too. He's been doing that for basically his entire career. And now, you can see how happy the Rangers were that he got that contract, and he finally has some permanence, getting to be a member of the New York Rangers for at least the next 2 seasons, barring a trade or anything like that. Now, I'm not saying when I say these examples that this is perfect, that this is an ideal situation, that families of pro athletes can just be uprooted at any single moment. when it's least expected and have to move cross country. It's not a perfect situation. It's not an ideal situation, but I don't know what the solution is. If you guys have a solution to this entire situation, whether it's Trouba or just, the bigger picture here, by all means, email it to me, leave it in the comment section, post about it on Twitter, do what you have to do. I'm all ears because it is unfortunate. It is unfortunate that this has to happen to families as often as it does when it comes to pro sports. But again, that's part of the territory. When you want to be a professional athlete and you want to, make all this money per season to play a game, that's one of the unfortunate, drawbacks of that profession. So, again, I just don't know what the solution to any of this would be. But there are more examples from the Ranger past. You look at somebody like Henrik Lundqvist. The Rangers once bought out Henrik Lundqvist, a franchise icon, probably maybe the best player to ever play for the New York Rangers. It's always a little bit difficult comparing goalies and skaters, but certainly he's in the conversation. Somebody that was synonymous with Ranger hockey for years, did everything the right way. Even people that aren't hockey fans, they know Henrik Lundqvist. And if you're a New York sports fan, even if you're not that into hockey, he was the man for the New York Rangers for a very, very long time. Everybody knows about Henrik Lundqvist, and that didn't stop them from buying him out of the final year of his contract. This is a franchise that once bought out the contract of the Rangers' current general manager, Chris Drury. Drury had 1 year left on his contract. He just was not the same player that he was, certainly in other stops in his career, and even really the first couple of years with the Rangers. He was still a good player when the Rangers first got him, but he was falling apart by that point, all the injuries, and just not an effective player anymore. He was the captain, and they bought him out of the final year of his contract. They also bought out, this isn't as big of an example, but they bought out Kevin Shattenkirk. Kevin Shattenkirk took less money from the Rangers, quite a bit less money from the Rangers, because he wanted to play for his childhood favorite team. That meant the world to him, and it didn't go very well. He gets bought out of his contract, and they send him on his way. It is also a franchise, the Rangers, that basically traded just about every single player that had anything to do with this team making it to the Stanley Cup final in 2014. You had Matt Zuccarello, who, these days they refer to Ryan Lindgren as the heart and soul of the New York Rangers. Back then, it was Matt Zuccarello, and he had a horrific head injury that he lost the ability to speak for some time, and he's come back from that, and he's still a great player, for the Minnesota Wild, and props to him for that. They traded him away. Dan Girardi and Ryan McDonough, both those guys, blue-collar, hard-hitting defensemen, wore it on their sleeve, went out there and battled every single night. Both of them traded away. Derek Stepan, great player for the Rangers, the Game 7 overtime hero of 2015. He is traded away for Tony DeAngelo, okay? Derek Brassard, another guy who went out there and left it all on the ice every single night, came up big in the playoffs year after year after year, traded away. Mark Stahl was here forever, and in the last year of his deal, he is traded to the Detroit Red Wings along with a second-round draft pick in exchange for literally nothing. It was, cash considerations. The Rangers didn't get anything back. It was a salary dump. You can go on and on and on throughout history. A lot of Ranger players have either been bought out or traded or otherwise kicked to the curb, and it's just the nature of the business. And I will be the first to admit this can be a cold, ugly business, but that's the way that it goes in professional sports. One more example, they traded Ryan Callahan, their captain, while they were in the middle of a season that would result in them going to the Stanley Cup final. And they trade him away because they were a couple $100,000 apart when it came to a new contract. They trade him away and brought in Marty St. Louis. But after all these examples, we have to make an exception for Jacob Trouba, who, by the way, from a hockey perspective, is not as good of a player as probably any of the players that I just mentioned. Maybe better than Mark Stahl. Other than that, I think all the rest of them have him beat. And I just don't understand why this Ranger organization needs to bend over backwards and cater to him when his contract would appear to say, and again, we don't know about that hypothetical clause, if there's some kind of deal where, Dr. Tyson Trouba's residency overlaps with his no-move clause. I have not seen that confirmed or denied from any reputable source. But if that clause does not exist, then the Rangers by no means have to acquiesce to Jacob Trouba's demands. Obviously, they can't trade him to a team that's on his 15-team list, but they can trade him to one of the other 16 teams. They can waive him, and it sounds like now they're kind of getting cold feet on the whole situation, and they're just not going to do it. I also see people that, are saying things like, the Rangers, they can bring Jacob Trouba back. They don't need that money for anything else. So why not just bring him back as your third pair defenseman? Yeah, okay, you can do that. Now they don't need the money for anything else because, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, all the big UFAs have come and gone. A lot of Ranger fans, myself included, were kind of underwhelmed by what the Rangers did in free agency. They go out and they get Sam Carrick. He's the new fourth-line center. Fine, harmless signing, but you're looking for something bigger. They made the trade with the Penguins. They bring in Riley Smith. I think there's, more good than bad to that trade, although there are a couple other players that I preferred more. But as it stands right now, yes, Sam Carrick is the biggest UFA signing for a team that is looking to get over a hump, for a team that fell just 6 wins shy of winning the Stanley Cup next year, and you need a little bit more, and all you bring in is Sam Carrick. Yeah, okay, now that all the free agents have signed, the Rangers don't need that money anywhere else, but they sure could have used it yesterday when all those free agents were signing with everybody else. Maybe the Rangers would have been in on a Tyler Bertuzzi, a Tyler Toffoli, a Steven Stamkos, any of these other big-name UFAs as well. It's at least possible. And whether or not you feel like the Rangers should have done that, should have gone big game hunting and, spent a lot of money and spent maybe a few too many years on one of those players, on maybe a Jonathan March or so, that's not really the point here. The bottom line is the Rangers had made a decision on Jacob Trouba. They backpedaled, and that now, the fact that his $8 million contract is still on the books, that basically prevented them and took them out of the running for any of those UFAs. Not sure the Rangers would have done it anyway, but any chance they would have had to reel in one of those big UFAs, that went out the window as soon as Jacob Trouba's contract was still on the board. So one more thing that I'll say here, I think next season, Jacob Trouba's got to be gone one way or another. There's no way around it next offseason because, first of all, his 15-team list will go down to a 12-team list, so you can always go the trade route if somebody will take him. And if that doesn't work, then you waive him and hope that somebody claims him. And if that doesn't work, then you have to buy him out because next offseason, as we've well documented on here, you've got Igor Shesterkin needing a new contract. You've got Alexi Lafreniere needing a new contract. They're both going to get big-time raises. That's to say nothing of players like Keandre Miller. If Capo Caco breaks out, do you try to keep him around? I mean, that's possible as well. It's a tough situation, man. I feel for everybody involved with this, but I don't think it's been handled very well by really any of the parties. We'll see how the whole thing shakes out here. Like I said, the term that I used yesterday, this feels like we're on chapter 3 of like a 10-chapter book, and we'll see how it all shakes out in the end. But one more thing, and I did mention this earlier in the episode. I'm going to reemphasize it right here, right now. Jacob Trouba's family, off limits, okay? They're real people. They clearly want to be here. It means a lot to them to live in New York. She's got goals and aspirations that, she wants to accomplish in her career very clearly. And people, you get these weirdos who are saying, oh, just take the free ride. You're married to a professional athlete. No, she's got things that she wants to do as well. And that's awesome that she's doing that. And again, nothing but respect to anybody that works in the medical field and, wants to make a difference, a positive difference in the world. So you can be angry about this whole situation or confused by it or just like, dumbfounded by the whole thing. His family's off limits. There shouldn't be anybody going on social media and saying things about them, and there definitely shouldn't be anybody saying things to them in public either. I don't think you'd be doing that if Jacob Trouba was, standing next to them at that same time. So, yep, just kind of going to leave things there. There are a couple of other, I'll just mention this real quickly here, a couple of other UFAs still available out there. Vladimir Tarasenko and Daniel Sprong are among them, but I'm not really holding my breath as far as the Rangers picking up one of them. We'll see. Rangers have also signed defenseman Casey Fitzgerald to a 2-year deal and forward Bo Grew. I'm not really sure if I'm saying that right, but I'll get it right for the next one. He is signed on a 1-year deal. Both of them are believed to be two-way deals, and both of them for the league minimum of $775K. So we'll talk about those players in a future episode as well. And of course, we're going to keep continuing the Jacob Trouba saga as we continue into the offseason here. But that will do it for today. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well at LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's at LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.